just wanted to point out the difference between gyri and sulcus. The gyri of the brain are the hills or the mounds, and the valley or depressions between each gyri are a sulcus. Okay? Let's look at the cross-section of the spinal cord, and what we're looking at here is this. So here's the vertebral body, here's the vertebral body, here's your spinous process, here's your spinous process, there's your spinal cord, there's your spinal cord. Okay. Let's look at the spinal cord, and we'll start at the different components, the inside being gray matter, which is unmyelinated, and in the center of the gray matter is the central canal. Surrounding it is all white matter. This is all myelinated. And the posterior part of the white matter is called the white columns or posterior columns, which has a fasciculus gracilis and a fasciculus cuneatus, which deals with your sense of proprioception and vibration. And in the gray matter, we have a dorsal horn and a ventral horn. The dorsal horn is where all of your sensory information comes in by way of these dorsal rootlets. So these dorsal rootlets send afferent or sensory information in to the dorsal horn, and then your motor information leaves from the ventral horn through these ventral rootlets, which we can see here. The ventral rootlets make up your ventral root or anterior root, while your dorsal rootlets make up your dorsal nerve root. And here is that ganglion, that swollen part. So again, sensory information comes in the dorsal root through the dorsal rootlets into the dorsal horn, and your motor information exits the anterior horn or ventral horn by way of the ventral rootlets into the anterior root. And it's this anterior root or ventral root that makes up all of your plexi, the cervical plexus, the brachial plexus, lumbar plexus, and sacral plexus. This is all motor nerve control. Surrounding and protecting your spinal cord are your meninges, the pia mater, closest to your spinal cord. There's the pia mater. And then let's look at the outermost, number 9 here, is the dura mater. That's the dura mater. And then the arachnoid is here. Between the dura mater and the arachnoid is a very fine space called the subdural space. And between the arachnoid and the pia is another space called the subarachnoid space. This is where your cerebral spinal fluid travels and flows through. Okay? And this is epidural fat, also some extra cushioning for protection all through here. This structure is not a dura. This is the posterior longitudinal ligament, which is very pain sensitive. As a disc starts to push, if it pushes back and hits the PLL, the posterior longitudinal ligament, that can elicit pain. Okay, let's go to our gentleman here and look at some of the nerves that come off. Here's your spinal cord. Spinal cord extends all the way down to about the L1, L2 interspace, where the conus medullaris tapers off. In the sacrum, we've got the chorda equina, which means horse's tail. And then we've got a few plexus, a cervical plexus, a brachial plexus, a lumbar plexus, and a sacral plexus. The cervical plexus is from C1 to C4. The brachial plexus is C5 to T1. It means C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1. Although there are 7 cervical vertebrae, there are 8 cervical nerve roots. In the lower back, there's the lumbar plexus, which is L1 to L4, and then a sacral plexus, which goes from L4 to S4. In the cervical plexus, And a very important nerve coming off of that is the phrenic nerve. Phrenic nerve goes to the diaphragm, and it goes from C3, C4, and C5. C3, 4, and 5 keep the diaphragm alive. In the neck, you also have the brachial plexus. Plexus means braid. And you can see these nerves make a braid. And as we follow it down, it'll take us to numbers 22, 23, and 24. 22 is the radial nerve. 23, if we follow it down to the palm, it goes to the first, second, third, and half of the ring finger. That's the median nerve. And then we have 24 is the ulnar nerve. If we follow this down in the forearm, we have the superficial branch of the radial nerve, and then we have a palmar branch of the ulnar nerve. And up here, this should be your axillary nerve. In the lower part, we have our very large nerve called the sciatic nerve here, largest nerve of the body. And then number 34, right here, that's your femoral nerve, and the femoral nerve becomes your saphenous nerve down here. Your sciatic nerve travels down in the back of the knee in that popliteal fossa and actually splits into a tibial nerve, and the tibial nerve stays back in the posterior compartment to your calf muscles, and it also splits into a deep peroneal nerve, and that deep peroneal nerve we can see wrapping, not deep peroneal nerve, I'm sorry, common peroneal nerve. That common peroneal nerve wraps right around the head of the fibula, and this is what happens when you sit with your legs crossed. Sometimes that common peroneal nerve gets impinged and gives you numbness or tingling into your feet. And that common peroneal splits into a superficial peroneal and a deep peroneal. And your deep peroneal nerve deals with all of your anterior compartment muscles, which are all of your dorsiflexors of the foot. And the superficial peroneal nerve stays superficial and deals with the sensory to your leg. Okay? All right, we hope you find this video helpful, and we'll see you real soon.